Okay, I wanted to be really, really quick. Cause it's late, and I'm about to go to sleep. Um, so I wanted to be really, really quick on this because I was just on the internet on YouTube, and there was a couple of videos that popped up about. Um, is a video says um, ADAT or buying ADAT or something with ADAT. Let me save you some time and money. And then the video went something to the point where it said, if you're gonna add additional interfaces to your studio, that make sure that the equipment that you have on your ADAT in other words, you take one interface and you want to connect it by using the ADAT connectors to add more inputs and outputs interface to your system. Let's say you got 8 and you want to add another 8, and you want to connect them by using what they call ADAT light pipe, which are just basically fiber optic type cables. Make sure that one says ADAT in and out to the other one that's going to be in and out. And another key thing is, if you add something like that, you got to make sure that one's going to be the master or the other one's going to be the slave, so the master controls the other one. But also, if you're going to do this with word clock or any kind of connections, and I was like, and it dawned on me and said, I can't believe, in my mind, this is what I was thinking. I can't believe he had to make a video like that. That he literally had to make a video where he had to tell people that if they're going to connect ADAT, in other words, you take one unit, the out of the master unit has to go into the in of the other one, and then of course the out of the second unit then goes into the in of the master. So you never connect the out to outs or in to ends. Out has to go to in, and so forth. But that to me was with the thing that it dawned on me. I said, you know what? That's common signal flow with everything. Like an input coming to this console, if you connect something to the input, it still needs to have something come out of the console, whether it's going to be recorded or you need to hear the monitors, the console, or it could be a little USB, it could be a little small mixer, or you're going to connect a piece of gear like a compressor or a preamp. And almost all gear has inputs and outputs. And so it dawned on me, I was like, maybe people don't really know that. And I had to make the assumption, because this is going to be, because I'm making this audio engineering class edition, and I was going to make class number 4, which is now going to become class number 5. I was going to talk about input, how signal flows in a DAW, which I'm still going to make that later on today. But it never dawned on me that I had to make the assumption, or I cannot make an assumption that people understand signal flow. So I'm going to say this: there are 2 key essential things you must know when it comes to gear and equipment in audio engineering. And that is key number 1, input to output and output to input. That's generally it. The other key component would be functionality, meaning whatever you're connecting in to use, understanding its functionality. Like if you plug a source into a compressor, and of course you need to hear the compressor, so you got to have something coming out of that compressor back into something, whether it's a mixer or into a port or to your interface or whatever, that you must you got to understand how the compressor works. That's functionality. So that's the two key components when it comes to using gear. The only other parts about audio engineering is just understanding basic things like room acoustics, sound pressure levels, SPLs, dBs, decibels, room noise, room reflections, mic placement, microphones, gear, all the other, which can be taught in a few days. But the key component to the whole signal flow is input to output, and what's functioning between the in and the out. I'll give you one example on this. Would be if I plug something into channel 1, that's an input. Whether it's a microphone or a piece of gear, that's an input. And then it's coming and it's going to come out of the channel to the master section. And then for you to hear what's going on with that channel out of the console through like studio monitors or headphones or whatever. Or if you want to record something from that channel, or maybe a direct out, either through the output of the channel, through a direct out, or maybe the output of like a bus channel output or something. Or that's input to output. And when you run something to an input, does it have functions for you to control the signal, like a microphone preamp, or to alter the signal with equalization, or if there's dynamics, or do you need to insert something onto the channel to affect from the input to the output? And that's the same thing with anything signal, whether you're hooking up ADAT from one interface to another, it has to come out of one interface into the next interface. So you need to run the output of an interface into the input of another interface. My mind, for some odd reason, I assumed that people knew that, but maybe people don't. Because it can be confusing, and sometimes people can see two pieces of gear and say input and input. They might think those two are the same, so they need to hook to each other. An input to an input, because they both say input. They might assume that that's how you're supposed to hook them up. And I'm like, no. It needs to go from one source to another. It needs to go into one source. It needs to come out of that into another source. So out to in. It's just like even with patch bays, the top rows are outs, the bottoms are in. Outs to in. Ins to outs, outs to ins. It's signal flow. And so to sum up the video, like I said, I'm going to talk about signal flow with the DAW. I talked a little bit about the console, some preamps, and microphones, but so this is going to be audio engineering class number 4, understanding the two basic. That's the gist of everything when it comes to audio engineering, is understanding the signal, how it's flowing into something and out of something. And if it's going into something, understanding the functionality of that signal going into something. So if in other words, if you plug up a microphone is going to be an output source, right? Because you're going to take the signal coming from whatever the microphone is picking up. The microphone's going to pick up that source. So it's going to go out, whatever the source is, into the microphone, out of the microphone, but via the cable, into like an interface or a console or something. So it's got to go out into something. If it goes to the console, it's got to go into the console. Let's say channel 1 is going to go into the preamp, come out of the preamp, but since the preamp is built into it, you don't have to connect anything to it. If you engage the EQ Then it's going to come out of the preamp into the EQ. Then out of the EQ into the output control, which is the fader. And then from the output of fader, since there's no cables, it's automatically hardwired to the output section for you to hear. And I was like, wow, maybe people don't know that. Or if you're going to use external pieces of gear, that's why on the back of external pieces of gear, they have inputs and outputs. It doesn't matter if it's a microphone preamp, a compressor, an equalizer, a reverb unit, a delay. They all have inputs and output. So if you plug for your microphone into a external preamp, you need to plug it into the input, and then the output needs to go to where you want it to go. Do you need to go into your interface? Do it needs to come into the console? Is it hardwired to a patch bay and you just patch it in? So the outputs of the units, if you're going to hardwire to your patch bay, the outputs need to come to the output section of the patch bays and hardwire to the inputs of the patch bay. So all your outs go to outs of a patch bay, and the ins. I'm thinking people knew this. And maybe people don't know that. And I'm like, that's probably explains why I get so many questions on people asking. Even on my channel, like, how do you hook up mixers and all that? I'm like, and I'm looking at like, well, like let's say you have a 12-channel mixer, and channels 1 through 12, those are inputs. Then the mixer might say like master main out, and a lot of times they don't say master out; they'll just say main out. But master or main is the same thing. And it might say control room or something. And I'm thinking to myself, some people think that you hook your speakers to the main or the main out when you really you're supposed to connect your control your monitor. Speakers are monitors. They're not master outputs. Your speakers don't, you're not monitoring the master output you don't use the speakers as the main output source coming out of something. You use your monitoring, because your speakers, your monitoring means you're constantly monitoring or listening to what's going on. So you need to monitor. I need to be paying attention. Monitoring means you're paying attention. So your monitor out, or control room out, or studio output, or on a mixer or something, like, even if you have an audio interface, it can say main out, and it can also still have like a 2-channel monitor out. The 2-channel monitor out is where you plug the speakers, not the main out. The main out is designed to come the main out, so when you're coming out of your interface, that's, whatever the case. But some people use the main out for their speaker output. I'm like, if you got monitor out, that's where you're supposed to plug your monitors. But if you're doing everything in the DAW, even though technically, if you're working inside your DAW, and technically the master output or the main output on the master channel is kind of computerly program wired to the main out of the interface, the main out is also wired to the monitor out. So some people might, well, why would some people might be thinking, well, if I got, let's say you have an interface, let me see something. Oh, this one. And some interfaces don't have a monitor out. Like my interface, that M-Audio has a monitor out as well as main out. My Motus have monitor out as well as main outs. My Antelope has monitor out as well as main out. But some interfaces don't. They still have the main out. So if you don't have monitor out, naturally you can still plug your speakers to the main out. Because technically, if you need to go back in the interface, you're not going to come through. You're not going to come to an output to go back into it as an input. It's an output. So you're going to go. Let's say if you're recording your DAW, you're doing anything in the DAW anyway, so you don't need to come back out of the interface. If that makes sense. If you're going to do everything in the box, like you're going to record everything in your computer, your DAW. And you got whatever inputs, like this got 2 mic inputs as an example. You're gonna just record. You're just gonna use the 2 inputs. The outputs are only gonna you can only just use the 2 main outputs for your speakers. Main outs or outputs, because you're not gonna record back. The main outs are not gonna be used as inputs because they're outputs. So, I just want to sum this up because it's 15 minutes. I didn't want to go super long on this, but that's it dawned on me. Maybe people don't know that. To understand signal flow is all about input to output. And so to summarize, when it comes to gear, understanding the input and where the input, then where the signal is going to go from there. It's got to come out. Whatever you plugged it to, it's got to come out. And then if it's going into something, what are the functionalities of what is it going into? For example, is it going into a preamp? How's the functions of that preamp work? If it's going into EQ, how does that work? Or if it's going into a compressor, how does that work? If it's going into a reverb, how does that work? That's all you really need to understand when it comes to audio engineering is, understanding the inputs and then understanding the outputs and what is it going into, understanding its functionality. That's the sum of it. All the other stuff is just technical things that you need to know as far as the room and acoustics and SPLs and near field, far field monitors, near field monitors. All that other technical stuff can be taught in a couple of days to understand that. But that's the basis of audio engineering is understanding how to use the signal going into something and coming out of something. And if it's going into something, understanding its functionalities, how to use. So a good engineer understands how and why something works versus someone who just knows what something is. I know that's a compressor. What is that? What's a compressor? But why do you have the compressor? Some people, they know what something is. They just don't know how or why you use it. If that makes sense sometimes. A good engineer not only knows what that is, he knows how and why. He knows how to use it and why to use it and also know when to use it. So they know. Not, someone who doesn't know, they just know they might learn what something is. They just don't know the how, why, and when. Or maybe sometimes where. A lot of times where is just, where is dealing with location. But some people just, they know how, they don't know how to use it or why do you use it, and they don't know when to use it. That's usually the thing, versus like, well, I know what that is. That's a compressor, but I don't know when do I need to use it or how to use it. But that was the basis of the 2 key things: understanding input to output, key component 1, and the other key component is understanding functionality. So when the signal goes into something, understanding the functions of what that signal is going into. And then that's it. Those are the 2 basic key elements when it comes to gear or software, or when it comes to signal, understanding what's happening to the signal. All right, that's it. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk about the next lesson. Thanks for watching, y'all. Have a good one.